In this week's drive, a Frenchman spoils a Canadian's party in England. Winners are grinners as rally teams go to Greece. What goes up must come down. And we float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. All this and more in this week's Drive. Brands Hatch in England hosted round 4 of the World Champ Car Series, the first time the circuit has seen kart racing since 1978. Inaugural kart champion Rick Mears won that race at an average speed of 95 miles an hour. 25 years on, most drivers were lapping at an average in excess of 100 miles an hour. Brands isn't a big track, it hasn't hosted a Formula One race for years, and is perhaps best known as the scene of the annual Formula Ford Festival. This is the view from literally inside Paul Tracy's helmet. The Canadian had started on pole and led for 50 laps. Jimmy Vasser, though, had a wasted trip across the Atlantic. His race was over before the end of the first lap. The top teams were hoping to need only 2 refueling stops during the 165-lap race, so the drivers were trying to conserve fuel as much as possible. British hope Darren Manning started in 8th place and was moving up the field when he ran wide at Paddock Hill Bend and dropped back to 10th. Malaysian driver Alex Yoong's first year in kart seems about as blighted as his single year in Formula One. That led to the only 5-lap caution period of the race. Frenchman Sébastien Bourdais, the reigning Formula 3000 champion and in only his 4th kart race, had taken the lead from Tracy during the pit stops by stretching his fuel and putting in a series of extra fast laps. Tracy circulated 1 or 2 seconds behind Bourdais, with Brazil's Bruno Junqueira, Bourdais' Newman Haas teammate, running in 3rd place. Meanwhile, fans spotted wisps of smoke coming from Tracy's engine. The resulting failure was as spectacular as it was inevitable. It put paid to Tracy's run of 3 wins in the first 3 races of the season. Tracy's retirement left Bourdais with an 11-second lead over Bruno Junqueira. The Frenchman from Le Mans pulled out a sizable margin over his teammate, but then encountered slower cars which failed to get out of his way in the closing 15 laps of the race. Bourdais carefully picked his way around the cars while Junqueira tried to catch him. Junqueira managed to pull the margin back to just 4 seconds with 10 laps remaining, but then he too was held up by the same group of lapped cars, and the French driver was 7.8 seconds ahead when he crossed the finish line to win from his teammate. Tracy and Bourdais have combined to lead for a total of 371 of 445 laps of Champ Car competition so far this year. Junqueira hasn't led a single lap, but his 2nd place finish was his 3rd podium of the season and moved him to within 11 points of leader Tracy in the standings. Bourdais is now 6th overall in the standings with 27 points. The next race of the Champ Car Series takes place at the Euro Speedway in Germany. Following its recent 1-2 finish in New Zealand and 1-3 in Argentina, the Peugeot team is preparing for the 6th round of the 2003 World Rally Championship as clear leaders of both the manufacturers and the drivers' points tables. The Peugeot team is a strong one, led as it is by Richard Burns, who currently tops the Drivers' Championship, and Marcus Gronholm, who has already won 3 rallies so far this season. However, the fact remains that Burns, who leads the World Rally Championship ahead of his teammate Marcus Gronholm, has not won a rally since arriving at Peugeot as world champion last year and relinquished his crown to his teammate in 2002. Now he wants to make amends and expand on his slender 2-point championship lead in front of the enthusiastic Greek fans.
It's one of my favourite rallies. It's not generally nice and fast and can be a little bit rough, but no, it's a good drivers' event.
Gronholm's win in Argentina was his first, Last year, both Burns and Gronholm were disqualified from the event for rule infringements. In a Peugeot team domination, Gronholm also won in New Zealand with Burns second. Earlier in the month, the team tested extensively in Greece in preparation for the 6th round of the 14-event series. Gronholm was looking forward to the rally too and said the 10 points for a win and 8 for second place made it difficult to catch a driver who was ahead on points. Richard maintains his lead thanks to his phenomenal consistency. He's been on the podium on 4 of the last 5 rallies. Peugeot has told Marcus not to comment in public about the new scoring system, but it's odd that you can win 3 of 5 rallies and still be second in the championship. Although with Marcus, it could easily have been 5 out of 5. This means that it's especially important to finish events and score points at every opportunity.
Yeah, it seems to be so, but it has always been so. We have to finish rallies, but now it's more important because you get so many points, even if you are second, third, so it's important. But I don't think about it because I drive for the win, so.
Meanwhile, some good news for rally fans has come from Kenya, home of the epic Safari Rally. Reports from Nairobi suggest that long-term financial guarantees from the Kenyan government and the establishment of a new organising team have boosted efforts to get the classic long-distance event back onto the calendar. Kenya Motorsports has a new organisational structure and a team of experienced former drivers, navigators and organisers on board to revitalise Africa's only leg of the championship. Let's hope it happens sooner rather than later. Ducati MotoGP team riders Troy Bayliss and Loris Capirossi went to the 3rd round in Spain with the team's long-awaited European debut at Jerez. The teams and engineers were looking forward to Jerez since they tested there 3 times during the winter and have some knowledge of the circuit. The data gained from those tests proved critical, and the Desmo Sedici has changed substantially since those early sessions. Capirossi, Bayliss and the 220-plus horsepower Italian V4 made headlines at the season-opening races in Japan and South Africa, leading both and dazzling fans with their speed and noise. They've also humiliated the bigger teams from Suzuki and Kawasaki, scared Yamaha, and even given the all-powerful Honda squad a wake-up call. The Spanish Grand Prix is the first of 9 consecutive races in Europe, and the Ducati team, second in the championship, will be making its European MotoGP debut. The small Italian factory hasn't raced at the Grand Prix level for over 30 years, but has dominated world superbike racing for over a decade. With riders like Troy Corser, Carl Fogarty and Troy Bayliss, who won the World Superbike title in 2001, narrowly lost it last year, and then moved to the brand new MotoGP squad for this season. He was asked how well he felt he had adapted to the very different MotoGP bikes and the new tracks that he had to learn alongside his other duties.
Well, as far as racing goes, the bike is quite a bit different, like as in weight and power. But you know, now I'm getting quite used to this, and it just feels like my normal bike again, or starting to feel more like my normal bike. But I'm used to the power and the difference now, so I don't really notice it. As far as the media side goes, all this is quite a bit different. It just seems like quite a bit more work, a lot more people about, especially journalists. But it is what it is.
The team is upbeat, and with good reason. The Jerez circuit in the southern region of Andalusia in Spain hosted the event for the 15th season in succession, with a partisan crowd of 130,000 expected to roar on their countrymen. The race also saw the return of Yamaha rider Marco Melandri, just 5 weeks after suffering a double fracture of the ankle and a chipped femur in practice for the opening round at Suzuka. Hometown hero Sete Gibernau was joined by his new teammate Ryuichi Kiyonari, taking the place of the late Daijiro Kato.
I think the standard bike and the factory bike are very close, and my standard bike was very good in welcome. If the bike is not good, you cannot win a race. So I think in welcome we just had the best package, and that includes the bike. My bike in welcome was very good, so I expect maybe that the factory bike can help me in some small areas like the clutch they say is maybe better, and a little bit of traction. But I don't know. I will have to try the bike. But the standard bike from Honda is a bike that can win races.
The Spaniard has been entrusted with the team's intriguingly named Factory Bike project. Once onto the track, Sete didn't disappoint his legion of fans, grabbing provisional pole position in early practice. He's gone from strength to strength after the death of his teammate Kato, winning at the Velcom circuit in South Africa. In Spain, Sete was obviously right on the limit. The 4.4-kilometre Jerez circuit has a bit of everything: short, medium and long turns, and long uphill and downhill braking, and it's notoriously tough on tyres. Toru Okawa was second fastest and finished 0.147 of a second behind Gibernau. The Japanese Honda rider has flourished in qualifying this season, but has failed to carry his form over to race days, and a sixth-place finish in South Africa has been his best result so far. Despite the recent testing session, Loris Capirossi was 0.14 second behind Okawa in provisional third place, but he was still looking for improvements. Valentino Rossi is the only current rider to have won all three Grand Prix classes at Jerez. The Italian won the MotoGP race for the last 2 seasons, setting pole position and new lap records both times. Troy Bayliss took 5th place in the early session, finishing just 51,000ths of a second behind Rossi. Former 500cc world champion Kenny Roberts Jr. showed glimpses of his old form and finished 6th, half a second behind Bayliss. Frenchman Randy Depunier was the fastest qualifier in the 250cc class. Having set the mark, Depunier crashed in the final minutes of the session, but didn't suffer any serious injuries. Watch as his front tyre comes right off the wheel, and Randy is flicked up in the classic, dreaded high side, which adds the pain of altitude to velocity. Pablo Nieto set a new lap record for a 125cc rider. The young Spaniard was over half a second faster than Alex de Angelis of San Marino. Another Spaniard, Daniel Pedrosa, claimed 3rd place ahead of Italian Lucio Cecchinello. But in the final times qualifying session for starting positions on the grid, it was Loris Capirossi's Ducati which snatched the quickest lap, literally in the last few seconds of the session. His effort brought joy in the team's pit, as the man he relegated to second by just 1/100th of a second was his teammate Troy Bayliss. A 1-2 on the grid in only their 3rd race was an incredible performance, although doing the same at the end of the race would prove a little harder. Italian Max Biaggi finished 2nd in Japan, 3rd in South Africa, and was hoping for a win in Spain. He also left his final dash very late and failed to go under 1 minute 42 seconds, but claimed 3rd place on the grid on his 27th lap. Biaggi's teammate Okawa completed the front row of the grid despite a minor crash. Though his Honda was only slightly damaged, he returned to the track on his spare bike and finished just over a quarter of a second off Capirossi's pace. Defending world champion Rossi went to 5th place on the grid, off the front row, but close enough. Gibernau was unable to go faster on Saturday. The Spaniard went into the gravel trying, but Friday's time was enough for 6th on the grid. Brazilian ace Alex Barros was a front-runner on his Honda last year and made the move to the works-backed Yamaha team for 2003. But he's had a wretched start to the season, and in practice it wasn't getting any better. For the 250cc class, Aprilia grabbed the top 3 places as Randy Depunier, fastest in Friday's qualifying, clinched pole during Saturday's session, the Frenchman snatching back the pole from Manuel Poggiali on the very last lap of the session, much to the relief of his team watching on the monitors. Pablo Nieto set a new Jerez lap record for a 125cc rider on the Friday, and his time couldn't be bettered by any of his rivals on Saturday. This would be his 2nd career pole position start. The other was at Jerez a year ago. The start saw Bayliss grab an early initial lead, with both Capirossi and Valentino Rossi dropping back as the pack started the 27-lap race. The enthusiastic crowd roared with delight to see the Ducati leading. Gibernau's agony was obvious after he crashed out on the 6th lap. Spain's other hope for a win, Carlos Checa, had retired 2 laps earlier. It took Rossi just 4 laps to claim the lead. Capirossi fell off spectacularly on the 13th lap, spoiling what might have been a dream race. Another race ace from an Italian team was watching the race. Ferrari Formula One driver Rubens Barrichello was at Jerez. While his challengers crashed out, Valentino Rossi stayed aboard his Honda to win for the second time in 3 races this year. He celebrated in traditional flamboyant style, standing on the seat. Rossi's arch-rival Max Biaggi finished a distant 6.3 seconds behind, followed by Bayliss on his Ducati, a further 12 seconds back.
Yes, we work very hard for the race during the practice, and for work for the race also at the end don't have time for try for the fast lap, and so starting second row, but I know my rhythm is quite good. And here the problem are the tires, but I think for everybody because don't have very much traction. But we try to work for have a good control when the bike slide, and have a good control, the bike, the setting is okay, so it's possible to win. This track is very good for me, I like, but 25 points are very important because the championship is very long.
Rossi is back on top of the standings, 14 points ahead of Biaggi, who's also taken 3 trophies but has yet to stand on the top step. Spain's Tony Elias blasted his Aprilia to victory in the 250cc class. He won after making a late charge and fending off several challenges on the last lap. Roberto Rolfo finished second, half a second behind, followed by Randy De Punier, another half a second further back. Poggiali still leads the title after 2 wins and a 4th. Rolfo's consistency is rewarded, and Elias gets a useful leg up in the standings. Lucio Cecchinello won the 125cc class as Aprilia collected a 1-2-3 finish. Steve Yenkner of Germany crossed second, less than 1/10 of a second behind, followed by San Marino's Alex De Angelis, 1/3 of a second further back still. Home crowd favourite Pablo Nieto took the early lead, but mechanical failure sidelined him after 10 laps. Cecchinello surged to the front and withstood a late challenge from Yenkner on the last lap to clinch his first victory of the year. Yenkner keeps his lead in the title, with Pedrosa and Cecchinello tied on points, with the next 3 still close. The next race is at Le Mans in France. In ideal racing conditions under a cloudy sky, the 2003 UIM Formula One Powerboat World Championship got underway in Portimao in Portugal. Watched by an estimated crowd of 40,000, the 29-strong fleet left the grid with Italian Guido Capellini immediately establishing his superiority after starting from pole. The Portuguese Grand Prix, now in its 5th year, has been dominated by Capellini since its inception, and this year's race was no different. The 7-times world champion held the lead for a full 50 laps, first holding off the challenge of Saudi Arabian Leith Farrowen, and then later in the race his fellow Italians, Massimo Ruggiero and Francesco Cantando. Ruggiero was second for 7 laps until his boat broke down, causing the race to be interrupted and restarted. A fuel leak in Cantando's boat forced him to remove his safety canopy. Somehow he managed to work his way through the pack as pin-sharp spray lashed into his face at speeds of up to 120 miles an hour. Capellini headed an Italian 1-2-3 with Cantando second and Fabio Comparato third. Farrowen briefly challenged the leading trio, but eventually had to settle for 4th place. There was to be a twist in the tale though, as Cantando was later disqualified for removing his canopy in violation of the UIM governing body's safety regulations, and he lost his place and points after a protest from another team. This promoted Comparato to second and consequently Farrowen up into 3rd place, with local favourite Duarte Benavente 4th and Dane Gert Ladefoged 5th. Capellini and Finland's Sami Selio tested a powerboating version of the head and neck system used by most racing car drivers.
Portugal is very lucky place. Also today, the race course is very difficult, and the finish 10 laps because the wind is coming. And for my boat, I don't like wind. But in any case, it's 20 points. It's very important for the new season.
Capellini was understandably delighted with the win and the points that take him to an early lead in the championship standings. The next Grand Prix of the 2003 Powerboat World Championships will be held in Helsinki in Finland in the middle of June. Finally, the wheel turns full circle. Simple wooden wheels are used in an ancient ritual in a small northern German town in what might just be the forerunner of modern motorsporting competitions. Every year at Easter time, after the first full moon of spring, thousands of people come to the small town to witness the mystery of the Osterreiter. There, in the gathering gloom of twilight on the hills overlooking the town, an obscure and dramatic old custom is reenacted. One after another, 6 enormous wooden wheels filled with straw are set ablaze and pushed down the steep slope of the Osterberg towards the valley of the little river Emmer. The origins of the organisers, the Dechenbrüder, are not really known, but it has been suggested that their name derives from Dechen, a term used by some crafts guilds in the Middle Ages. In the past, the Dechenbrüder were divided into 3 distinct groups, each of which rolled their own wheels down separate slopes around the town. Today, they are united into a single organisation, and only one slope, the Osterberg, remains accessible for the event. The material put into the wheels is a special kind of threshed rye straw, chosen for its exceptional length, which used to be provided by the local farmers. However, modern farming methods and machinery no longer make straw that is long enough to be tied into the wheels. In order to obtain straw of the right quality and length, the Dechenbrüder harvest it themselves using an old-fashioned harvester and a 50-year-old threshing machine, bundling the sheaves by hand. To prepare the straw, it is separated into small handfuls and tied together with hazelwood switches. These switches must be twisted several times to make them pliable and elastic enough to hold the straw together and attach it firmly to the wheel. Care is taken in this task as it is essential that the straw does not come loose as the wheels make their bumpy descent down the hill. It takes a total of 4 Dechenbrüder 45 minutes to fill just one wheel with almost 250 pounds of the specially prepared rye straw. According to tradition, the wheels are handmade from seasoned oak fashioned by a cartwright. Now, however, it is necessary to rely upon the skills of a carpenter as the profession of cartwright has died out. Before each event, the wheels are thrown into the River Emmer to soak the wood and make them less likely to burn up. But most of the 25,000 spectators who watched from the top of the hill and at the bottom were probably more interested in the atmosphere and the spectacular sight, rather than wondering where the tradition originated. Once the day has faded and the wheels are properly loaded with straw, they're set on fire, and when they're fully alight, they're set off down the steep hill above the town. Each wheel is 1.7 meters in diameter and weighs about 400 kilograms. The wayward wheels can reach speeds of up to 60 kilometers an hour in their entirely uncontrolled journey down the steep hill. Each wheel has an inscription carved into its rim. In the past, the wheels often bore a Christian message, but in more recent years, some of the wheels have also had social and political messages. An inscription in 1951 read, "6 years after the war, sorrow, still times without peace." And in 1968, "People of the world, struggle against hate and envy, then there will be peace for all time." Eventually, the wheels need replacing, and old wheels are sometimes donated to various museums in Germany. After all 6 burning wheels arrive in the valley to the cheering crowd, the celebration is crowned with a display of fireworks. But no matter what speed lights your particular fire, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.